life shaped by trauma and fear. Beneath every public triumph lay unresolved pain. Tyson's anger and aggression were never just tools of a fighter. They were coping mechanisms for a boy who grew up in a world that offered little safety, love, or stability. Understanding him requires looking past the headlines to the childhood that forged him, the mentors he lost, and the private struggles that continued long after his fame peaked. A broken boy in Brownsville. Before the world knew Iron Mike, Tyson was a child wandering the streets of Brownsville, New York, struggling to survive. Poverty, neglect, and exposure to crime were constants in his early life. He was small, vulnerable, and often alone, learning quickly that protection and safety had to come from himself. Tyson's legendary knockout power wasn't born in gyms or sparring. It was a response to fear. He was beaten, bullied, and left invisible, with no consistent guidance or family support. Violence became his language, his armor against a threatening world. Every fight he entered as a youth was not about glory, but survival. Brownsville shaped him into someone who understood that only strength could ensure safety. The boy who learned to defend himself on the streets carried those lessons into adulthood, often confusing aggression with control and survival instinct with identity. Early trauma was the foundation for both his brilliance and his later struggles. The mentor, who saw the boy, Customato, entered Tyson's life and became more than a trainer. He became the father figure Tyson never had. For the first time, the troubled boy encountered someone who believed in his potential rather than his problems. Cus taught discipline, focus, and self-belief, transforming Tyson from an angry, isolated youth into a prodigy with direction. Under his guidance, Tyson learned to channel his fear and rage into boxing, developing skills that would make him legendary. But the bond went beyond training. It offered emotional security and love. When Cus died, Tyson lost more than a mentor. He lost his anchor in a chaotic world. The boy who finally felt seen and protected was thrust back into instability. That loss was pivotal. It triggered emotional fragility and set the stage for future missteps. Tyson's rise to fame was built on the foundation Cus provided, but without him, the young champion lacked the guidance necessary to navigate both life and boxing. The youngest champion. At just 20, Tyson defeated Trevor Berbick to become the youngest heavyweight champion ever. The world saw perfection, a fighter who appeared unstoppable, machine-like, and unmatched in power. Fans were in awe, promoters saw financial gold, and the media celebrated a cultural phenomenon. But behind the spectacle, Tyson was still grieving Cus's death, feeling unmoored at a critical moment. The sudden fame brought more than recognition. It brought pressure, influence, and manipulation. People who barely knew him assumed control of his finances and decisions, exploiting his trust. Tyson, naive and desperate for approval, initially did not recognize the danger. He only saw admiration and support, unaware of the predatory forces around him. The boy from Brownsville, now champion, was still learning that not everyone who smiles at him has his best interests at heart. This tension between public triumph and private vulnerability would mark much of his life. Fame as a prison. With fame came a paradoxical captivity. Tyson had wealth, global recognition, and power, yet he remained haunted by emptiness. The inner void the ring could not fill persisted, regardless of money or adulation. His entourage expanded, yet no one understood the depth of his emotional turmoil. He still struggled with the frightened, lonely child he had been. Public perception painted him as untouchable, but privately he felt trapped by expectations, judgment, and the very success he had fought to achieve. As his public image soared, his personal life descended into chaos. The disconnect between how the world saw him and how he experienced life intensified, creating vulnerability that predators would exploit. Every victory amplified the pressure and the isolation, making the hollow triumphs even more difficult to reconcile. Tyson's fame, celebrated by millions, was simultaneously a cage built from admiration, greed, and misunderstanding. The marriage that cracked. In 1988, Tyson married actress Robin Givens, and the union was seen as a fairy tale for a troubled young man. But the marriage was fraught with tension from the beginning. Fame, unresolved trauma, and personal insecurity fueled arguments, emotional strain, and public conflict. Tyson struggled with the pressure of maintaining his image while grappling with private demons. Givens felt trapped and fearful in a relationship that often mirrored the chaos Tyson had known as a child. Their troubles became public during an infamous Barbara Walters interview, where Givens described the marriage as torturous. Tyson's silence and visible distress revealed vulnerability rarely seen by the public. For millions, the sight of the champion appearing powerless challenged the myth of invincibility. Sympathy quickly turned to scrutiny, and his personal life became fodder for judgment. The marriage exposed the fragility beneath the legendary exterior, showing that fame could not mask deep-seated emotional wounds. The spiral after humiliation. Following the public fallout from his marriage, Tyson's life began to unravel. Humiliation, judgment, and relentless scrutiny intensified his inner turmoil. He began making reckless choices, often trusting the wrong people while retreating deeper into destructive patterns. The more the public criticized, the more he isolated himself. Personal and professional missteps compounded, and the path to stability grew increasingly narrow. Tyson was no longer just a flawed celebrity. He was a man overwhelmed by forces he could neither control nor fully understand. These years set the stage for one of the darkest chapters in sports history, as a champion once celebrated for dominance now struggled with humiliation and loss of direction. The external applause masked internal collapse, and every attempt at recovery seemed undermined by the same unresolved trauma that had defined his early life. Loss. That forced reflection. In 2009, Tyson faced a tragedy that would alter his life profoundly: the death of his 4-year-old daughter, Exodus. The accident struck with cruel suddenness, leaving Tyson in unbearable grief. This loss was different from his prior challenges. It forced him to confront all the unresolved trauma he had carried for decades. For days, he barely spoke. For weeks, he barely moved. Yet this tragedy became a turning point. Tyson realized that survival was no longer enough. He had to actively rebuild his life. The pain of loss catalyzed reflection, self-examination, and the willingness to confront his past. The experience revealed a man capable of vulnerability, honesty, and change, pushing him toward a journey of therapy, recovery, and eventual redemption. Rebuilding and redemption. In the years following Exodus's death, Tyson began a painstaking process of healing. He entered therapy, cut toxic influences, and confronted his childhood trauma. Speaking about his experiences, including abuse, neglect, and fear, allowed him to redefine his identity. The public began to see him not as a villain or unstoppable force, but as a survivor. His one-man show, Undisputed Truth, revealed the human complexity behind the myth, humor, vulnerability, and heartbreak. Tyson's story became one of resilience, demonstrating that even a life built on violence and chaos could be redirected through reflection and accountability. His journey highlights a rare form of redemption, not through championships, but through understanding, growth, and honesty. The final fight. Mike Tyson's life is a study in extremes. From unmatched triumph to devastating failure, he was built by fear, crowned by fame, and challenged by his own demons. Yet his later years reveal a man who finally learned to speak the truths he had long suppressed. Tyson did not become the conventional hero, but something rarer, a survivor unwilling to let his past define him. Even as age and the demands of public expectation weigh on him, his greatest fight may no longer be in a ring. Instead, it is the ongoing struggle to be seen as fully human, flawed, vulnerable, and capable of redemption. Tyson's story is a testament to resilience, the power of confronting one's past, and the possibility of reclaiming life from trauma, fame, and failure. And